How y'all, Wyrm here. So per the title of the video, this is actually a two-parter. The first one is exploring the possibility and what a collaboration or crossover would be like between the two biggest games of the Final Fantasy series, Final Fantasy VII and XIV. The second part of the video is regarding the live letter that's actually landing this weekend, and it'll go over some of the things we should expect to see and some of the things we're just hoping to see. A crossover has been something that ever since 1.0, even when it was in development, I remember constant discussions on multiple forums, just talking about this actual discussion itself. People wanted crossovers before crossovers were even a thing. We were all talking about Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 was also on everybody's mind because that was the current game. But 7 was always the top talk. People always wanted a 7 crossover. Now 7, as you already know, is in the headlines as much as Final Fantasy XIV as of late. Mainly for two reasons. Final Fantasy VII got its official remake, and then the second part or continuation of that remake called Integrate. Now unfortunately, as much as we were expecting a crossover to come for the Final Fantasy VII remake, we actually didn't get one. But given the fact that Final Fantasy XIII and XV have actually gotten crossovers, I think it's inevitable. It's only a matter of time. I was personally giving this a lot of thought. I was actually thinking about this entire subject, and it occurred to me exactly why we didn't get a crossover for the remake when it came out. I'll avoid the spoilers, but it's already publicly known already that Final Fantasy VII Remake's storyline greatly differs from the storyline of Final Fantasy VII. They're fairly close, but both of them just diverge apart. Now, given that actual storyline change, it makes perfect sense to me, personally, why we actually didn't get a crossover. Because this story was unexpected, we didn't really see it coming. And it's something that probably wouldn't have tied in properly to a crossover just yet. But now we have a solid grasp of what the story is, we have fully explored Final Fantasy VII Remake and Integrate, so we know exactly where they are now. So by the time the next part of the remake comes out, whenever that's going to be, I think that's the absolute perfect time for when an actual crossover between 7 and 14 will come out. Now, aside from crossover events, Final Fantasy XIV has a number of Easter eggs and little additions from the Final Fantasy series that we've gotten over the years. We have multiple series bosses in the Stormblood race. For example, we have glamours from most of the main series like Squalls from Final Fantasy VIII, the Warrior of Light from the original Final Fantasy, and you even have Cloud's outfit from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. And of course, who can forget Cloud's motorcycle Fenrir, which we got because that's one of the most popular mounts in the game right now. Another great reference we actually got recently from Final Fantasy VII was the Scorpion boss in the Bojin Southern Front. Now, one of the most recent full-blown crossovers we got, of course, was the crossover between 14 and Nier Automata. We got an entire Alliance raid series and a significant storyline based all around that crossover, and that lasted the entire expansion, and it's going to be in the game for the rest of the game's existence. But the point I'm trying to make is this: players lap up crossover events and any other Easter eggs that we can get from the series. I'm always personally so excited whenever we get even a small little Easter egg from the Final Fantasy series. Now, this is something as simple as the Final Fantasy VIII music we got during the Eden Raid series, which I absolutely adored because I love Final Fantasy VIII. It's just such a golden opportunity. In terms of plot, it could be anything. They could end up getting lost and end up in Eorzea for some reason, and we have to help them to get back. That's the same thing that happened to Lightning. It was literally in between 13.2 and Lightning Returns that Lightning ended up in Eorzea, and we had to help her throughout Eorzea, fighting multiple fates, multiple bosses from Final Fantasy 13, all helping her to get back where she belonged. And that was actually her stepping from Final Fantasy 13.2 into Lightning Returns, the final game of the 13 series. That's just a prime example. The team of Avalanche stepping from the remake over to the new game that's coming, and for some reason they end up falling through a portal or something and we have to help them get back. And that's just about it for my rant regarding a Final Fantasy VII x 14 crossover. If you have any opinions on this, share them in the comments. I'd love to personally read them. Now then, on to the second subject of this video, which is the live letter number 66 that's coming this weekend on Saturday the 18th. Now, this is the last live letter we're going to get before Endwalker. If you're new to Final Fantasy XIV, or if you haven't tuned into the live letters before, the last live letter before an expansion launches is usually something special. We usually get a ton of details regarding the expansion and any upcoming changes Square Enix has planned. Now, we haven't gotten much information about what this live letter is going to be about. However, as I've already stated, we can speculate based on what we've actually gotten in previous live letters before significant expansions came out. And usually they tend to line up the same. So here's some of the things that the community is expecting to see, I'm expecting to see, and what people are actually discussing we're going to see. A window into the job changes coming in Endwalker. Now, honestly, this is a given. We've seen it in all the other live letters that come before an expansion. The previous live letters elaborate a lot on the upcoming changes to each of the individual jobs, as well as the roles overall. Now, as you already know, the healers are actually getting significant changes going into Endwalker, and the entire role is going to be redistributed in terms of what healers are going to do as well. So people are expecting a lot more detail regarding what the healers are going to be in Endwalker, specifically how they're categorized at this point. Now, a lot of healers are actually personally hoping for a number of DPS changes to their jobs as well. DPS as a healer is a relatively simplistic process. I think people are hoping for a bit more variety, or maybe just a bit more interaction with the DPS, like a rotation for example, instead of having to hit glare every second. Now, another hope more than expectation that people are hoping for in Endwalker, and that will be addressed in the live letter, is a change to the DPS jobs in order to make them a little more distinct from each other. Myself personally, I'm hoping for more support options from the Dancer, or just a little subtle improvement. I mean, I love where Dancer is right now. I just want its support kit to be a bit more effective, for lack of a better word. Like our heal, for example, is a nice band-aid, but that's all it is. It's barely a band-aid. And finally, if history is any guide, Machinist is going to get completely reworked again, because frankly it's been reworked with every expansion ever since it was released. So Machinist is in a good place right now, at least according to people who play it, but you never know what's going to happen. Information on gameplay changes. Now, we have a number of gameplay changes actually coming in Endwalker. Some of it we've gotten detailed information about, the rest of it we've only gotten little mentions about. Now, one of the most discussed, as you probably already know, is the stat changes that are actually coming in Endwalker, also known as the number squish. Now, it's likely this number squish, it's just literally just going to be reducing the numbers that we're going to see actually being outputted by the system. It frees up the system's resources. But mainly, aside from seeing lower numbers from your actual output compared to what you saw before the expansion launched, it's probably just going to be a bit jarring for a day or two, and then we'll just get used to it. Now, also in this category are people's hopes for a number of animation changes for the jobs and some of the environments as well. Now, to my knowledge, nothing massive has been announced in this department. I think there's only going to be some subtle changes, but people are hoping for some specific ones. Like, for example, the gunbreaker animations are a bit weird, and they always have been throughout Endwalker's role. Part of a gunbreaker's actual rotation, the animation made things blurry throughout an entire area for people, and it only lasted for a fraction of a second, but you could see it. I don't know if that's still a thing, but if it is, I'm hoping it would be addressed by Endwalker. The job abilities trailer. Now, this is something we've gotten with every live letter beforehand. You get an in-depth description, or at least showing off in better detail what each job is going to be doing in terms of their new abilities, or just showing them off generally. Now, we got a lot of this in the benchmark trailer, but the benchmark literally flew through it all. Like, I was looking at the Dancer one, I saw a new color actually spinning around it, but that's all I saw. It was literally on screen for like a second and a half. So myself and everybody else are hoping for a detailed trailer showing them off in much better detail. Information on the new data center and for upcoming server changes. Now, this is the most talked about discussion on forums and discords all over the internet at the moment. On this subject, SE have already stated that they're looking into a number of server changes, and the new data center is on its way as well. They didn't want to make any changes before Endwalker because the numbers are fluctuating highly at the moment, and nobody saw this influx of players from WoW to Final Fantasy XIV coming, and it definitely affected what the actual server changes were actually going to come in Endwalker. But we've had a few months now, we've been able to monitor everything, or at least Square Enix has anyway. So I think now they're actually in a good place where they can actually predict how many players are going to be coming in Endwalker and what server changes they need to make. So I personally, as well as everybody else, are pretty hopeful for actually getting some announcements in the live letter regarding what these server changes are going to be. But at the least, I think we can expect information regarding the new data center and how transfers from the other data centers to that new one are going to actually play out. Now, in terms of data center changes in the past, what they've actually done is they've offered free transfers from data centers from one to the other. At least they did that in A Realm Reborn, and they did that when they split the Chaos data center, for example. So I'm expecting free actual transfers of data centers for anybody who wants them for a limited window. Merchandise, merchandise, merchandise. Now, merchandise is part of every live letter. I don't think there's been a single one that hasn't had merchandise in it. Personally, I'm hoping for some new digital merchandise, particularly Endwalker related. Maybe some new glamours or anything else like that. Like, I'll take anything at this point. Now, on this subject as well, many of us want information regarding the physical collector's edition of Endwalker. Now, if you recall, if you tried to actually buy one yourself and failed, it actually sold out just in a couple of minutes. Most people still have it in a pending state in their basket, because when they purchased it, there weren't enough left and it's just left in a pending status. Now, we've got no notifications regarding this, or at least I didn't anyway. I waited over a month, or close to 2 months actually, until I just said screw it. I asked them to cancel it, and then I just went for the digital collector's edition. But a lot of people are still holding out hope for a physical collector's edition. But I'm personally hopeful in the live letter that we'll get some information regarding a physical collector's edition, or just clarification that if we're going to get one or not, because it would allow people to cancel their orders and then they can just buy the digital collector's edition, for example. And that's pretty much everything I could think of regarding what we should get in the live letter and what I saw people talking about online. I appreciate everybody watching. Endwalker's so close, I can literally taste it right now, and my hype's going to go through the roof, especially when this live letter hits. It's going to go extremely high. There's going to be no ceiling with my hype. I'm actually going to be in London this weekend because the Final Fantasy VII Remake concert is actually scheduled for this time. It got postponed once or twice because of COVID-19, but now we're finally getting it, so I'm very excited. And a lot of my friends from the FanVents Discord are going to be there as well, and we're going to be watching the live letter together as well around 2 AM I think on the Saturday morning. I'm going to be exhausted by the time the concert comes around, but I'm not missing this live letter, not a chance. This is the big one. I'm already working on my next lore video as well for next week, so look forward to that please. Thanks all, and now, as always, have a good one.